All right, hello everyone, and welcome to an episode of Dear Dr. Fantasy. And I am joined today by the duo that is known as iWizard, the channel, but it's Nikki and Jordan, and it is a huge pleasure for me to welcome you to today's episode of Dear Dr. Fantasy. Hello to both of you. How are you?
Great. Thanks so much for having us. This is really exciting.
Yeah, thanks, Phillips. Great to be here.
Yeah, well, I'm excited. I have admired a lot of your videos. I've had the pleasure of talking with Jordan actually on a few occasions. Always come away enlightened from those discussions. And Nikki, this is the first time I get to talk with you, so I'm really excited to be able to do that.
Oh, big time. Same here, Philip. And you are like at this point kind of an institution on BookTube, and so I'm just happy that you're here doing this day in and day out and making us all smile and teaching us something in the process. So we appreciate you. Much love, and thanks for having us.
Well, it's my pleasure, and you two and I have a lot in common, actually. We're educators, we do BookTube, we are writers, so we have a lot to talk about today.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, but I will have, of course, a link in the description to iWizard, where you'll find a lot of really great content. Very, I think there are very few people out there that I would regard as deep, as well read, and philosophical as you two. And what you do on your channel is something that I really resonate with myself. So, this is the kind of content people that I really love, this kind of content, and I think that I would love to see more of it on YouTube. It's really good stuff. It's very thoughtful and thought-provoking. I do encourage everyone right off the bat to go and check out that channel.
Thank you.
Wow. Thank you so much.
Just a pleasure. Thank you for what you do. But let's talk about books and fantasy and stuff. So there's two of you. So I want to get to my question, my standard question early on today. So Nikki, would you like to go first? Would that be okay?
Yeah, I'd love to go first. So
awesome. So I'll just, everybody probably knows what I'm about to say, but going on the theory that you are what you read, what have been some of the formative reads of your life, Nikki, and how would you describe them as being part of who you are? And wherever you want to go with this, going back to as far back to your youth as you like.
Okay. So I'm going to be really cliche for a millennial. And of course, one of my formative reads was Harry Potter.
Yes.
I'm going to go ahead and say that I'm special, right? Because I had my own experience with it. And I started reading them when I was 10 or 11 years old, so right near the beginning. And the reason for that is because my maiden name is Potter.
Oh, no way.
And so it was like the title. And we used to get crank phone calls all the time, asking for Harry. But I just loved it so much. And so as soon as they'd come out, I get them. And it really was formative for me because the last book came out in what I would consider my last year of adolescence when I was 19 years old.
Wow.
And so it was the last summer of me having a job that wasn't related to my field. And so I was a summer camp counselor. And I remember waiting outside Barnes and Noble for the midnight release of Harry Potter.
Wow.
And I had the worst age campers that you could imagine. I had 12-year-olds and they knew I was really excited for the last Harry Potter book to come out. And they kept threatening to find out how it ended to tell me how it ended. So I had to read it way faster than I wanted to read it, but they didn't get to ruin it for me.
That's just evil. That's 12-year-old behavior. Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's something about that age where I don't know. So definitely Harry Potter. And in the same vein, of course, Lord of the Rings. So just before I was going into entering high school, The Fellowship of the Ring came out in theaters, and I got it on DVD. And the first time I watched it was on DVD. And this is when DVDs were still kind of new. And
I still have DVDs. Yeah,
me too.
Yeah, us too. But we didn't have a mechanism to watch them except for on the computer. And so I remember sitting in front of the computer by myself watching Fellowship of the Ring. And when it ended, I was just like, I need more of this. Like,
Nice.
I want to be in this world way longer. So I read all the books at that point.
That's a
And
good
so,
adaptation. Yeah.
oh, I just love books that like bring you into the world and just you want to live in it. So definitely that. Author wise, I think Neil Gaiman was pretty formative for me, because like after that, I kind of got into him and read most of his stuff.
Yep.
And then after meeting him, I started reading a little more philosophy. So he got me into the existentialists. So I loved
Cool.
Sartre and reading Nausea and the words. And so we read a lot of things together. A.S. Byatt, Possession.
Okay.
And then it got into more of like the contemporary lit, like Jeffrey Eugenides, one of my favorite books ever, is The Marriage Plot. Because in a lot of ways, I think it mirrors our relationship. Not entirely, because it, spoiler, doesn't end too well.
Oh no.
So,
I hope not.
so, but a lot of it kind of reminded me of that. So yeah, those are, I think, really the formative ones for me.
Yeah, cool. Those are that. What a great list. And did you two was part of your just hitting it off together well? Was that a common interest in fantasy, or was that?
Actually,
No.
she turned me on to fantasy.
Oh, okay.
Well, I guess I could give a little bit of my story.
Let's
You
do
know,
it.
because you watched the video that I made about how I fell in love with reading and what I
That's
feel like
right.
it does for me.
Which is a great video, by the way. I just want to plug that
Thank
one.
you.
Yes. Yeah, that was a
Thanks.
really powerful testimonial about your life, but also the role that reading played in awakening a sense of just the world and what you could be, a new sense of
Yes.
yourself. Really powerful video. Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate it. That came from the heart. So yeah, so as I said in the video, I wasn't a big reader in high school. I I just wasn't into it. I remember my mom would bring me to Barnes and Noble and she would all but beg me to buy a book. And her deal was a deal that a lot of parents have for their children, which is um I'm not going to buy you stuff unless it's your birthday or Christmas or something like that, or Hanukkah. But my mom's Jewish, my dad's Christian. But I will buy you a book anytime you want a book. So we go to a bookstore, you can buy several books. And she would always get really frustrated because I wasn't interested in reading. And so I would get a guitar book because I was into guitar, or I would buy a book, about cars, old, hot rods and things like that. My mom would be like, well, that's not really what I meant when I said I'll buy you a book, right? So I didn't get good grades in high school. And when I graduated, I became a mail carrier. And I did that for almost 3 years. And I fell in love with reading while I was a mail carrier, and reading definitely changed my life. Like that video title, that thumbnail, it wasn't a joke, it wasn't a lie. That reading changed everything. It just turned everything around. And it wasn't that I really changed; it's that I was always a reader. I just didn't know it yet. There's that famous quote that teachers have on their in their classrooms by, I think it's by James Patterson, and he said there's no such thing as a kid who hates reading. There's only kids who haven't found the right books yet, or something like that. That turned out to be really true for me. The first author that I really got into that awakened that was Charles Dickens.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know what it was, but I decided that I wanted to read Charles Dickens. I was at the library or something like that, and I picked up Great Expectations, and I fell in love. I totally fell in love. It was that feeling of truly like falling in love with literature, like in a snap moment. People say it was love at first sight. That's kind of how it was for reading. I blasted through that thing in a couple of days. And so I went from someone who never read it all and wasn't interested in it to someone who was blasting through Charles Dickens. I read David Copperfield. I read Oliver Twist. I read A Christmas. So I pretty much just worked my way through Charles Dickens. I was reading Alan Watts, who is like a kind of a beat philosopher in the sort of 1950s and 60s. He was, one of these Western philosophers. He had a doctorate in divinity, and he was sort of an interpreter of like Zen Buddhism and Taoism and like the both the like Madhyamaka tradition of Buddhism, but also like the sort of more idealist like Yogacara tradition.
Yeah.
And so he basically introduced the West essentially. I know there were earlier people, Arthur Schopenhauer and stuff like that, but my point is during that sort of hippie 1960s, that whole Beat generation, he was giving lectures and writing all these books and spreading and teaching basically the West about especially Zen Buddhism and Taoism. He wrote a book called Tao, the Watercourse Way, Wisdom of Insecurity, Nature, Man and Woman. So all of these sort of books about Buddhism, and that's how I got into philosophy.
And Alan Watts has an amazing voice.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so you could find like old recordings of his lectures, and the creators of South Park, Trey Parker and Matt Stone, actually made animations to go along with some of his lectures, and they're
no
just
way.
so fun. Yeah.
Yeah,
It was
really
a
fun.
while ago they made them, maybe in the 90s.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, for
So
sure.
they're early animation.
So I got into him, and then that led to like a whole journey of reading philosophy, and that was it. Like I enrolled in community college the summer after I started reading. I said, this is fun. I love doing it. When I'm at work, all I want to do is be back home reading a book. And so I decided, okay, I really appreciate the Postal Service. I had some good years there. I'm sure that job is perfect for some people, but for me, I was bored. I couldn't imagine. Once I started reading, I could not imagine a future where I would be putting the mail in the box every day. And that's what I would be doing for the rest of my life. Again, it's a wonderful career for people who want to be doing that. It's an active job and all of that. But I said, I want to do something with my mind because I got to keep going on this path because it feels great and I'm changing in ways that I'm beginning to notice. So I enrolled in community college and I actually met her. I went to a party at UMass Amherst. She was a D1 athlete, actually. She was on the UMass cross country team. And
Oh, wow, a fellow runner. Nice.
yeah. Oh, okay.
Oh, we can talk about running too.
Yeah, yes, indeed. Well, I play tennis these days, don't run as much, but I used to do more half marathons and the occasional marathon, but I used to run cross country and track in high school. So yeah. Yep.
Very nice. Very nice. So
yeah, I was not a D1 athlete though. So, I mean, that's impressive, right?
Oh, I was impressed. She was an engineer and she was an engineering major. And so she was taking like all these classes. She had this experience with being an athlete. And I was so impressed by her. But the reason I bring that moment up is because she is the one who introduced me to fantasy.
Yeah.
I thought fantasy was silly. I thought it was what nerdy kids, read by flashlight after they were told to like go to bed, sitting up in bed reading, Lord of the Rings.
And it took several years for me to convince him to read Harry Potter, because he just thought it was so lame and so dumb. And so we read all of them out loud together.
Yes.
We're going to talk about why fantasy is not that stereotype in a moment. I want to talk about that.
Yes.
But first, just a couple quick remarks from me. D1, by the way, for people who are not familiar with the American collegiate athletic system, that's Division I. You have to be among the very best to be an athlete at a D1 school. Those are the big state schools. So just so people know, you have to be an elite athlete to make that team. And that's impressive. And number two, I do want to say, Jordan, that you would have been one of my favorite students. I teach at a community college. I went to a community college myself.
I taught at a community college.
There you go. Yeah.
4 years.
Yeah.
Oh.
Wonderful. And I believe down to my very core in the mission of community colleges. For me, that is just where I want to be in education. I love teaching. I also am inspired by students like you, who there is something to be said for a student who works for a few years after high school and then comes back to college, not following the quote unquote normal path of just going straight to the middle class kind of expected path of going to college right after high school. The fact of the matter is, the students who work for a few years, who maybe join the military or go in and have to earn their own, bread and butter, they come back and they know what they want. They have
Exactly.
Yes.
experience. They are organized and they're passionate and they want this. Whereas a lot of the students, and this is not their fault, but a lot of students who come right out of high school have no idea what they want, why they're there, and they flounder. And I don't think it's entirely their fault either. But my goodness, the ones who come back after working for a few years and are passionate about learning, it's just a privilege to have those students. I am sure your professors are like, oh, yes, they're one of those. Yes, having you in their class, I'm quite sure they were happy to have you as a student.
I hope so. I'm like you, Philip. I love community college. It is so important that we have those. I like the mission of community colleges. I think the teachers are oftentimes better and more down to earth. I don't want to
Teachers first.
Yeah, they're teachers first. That's my point. Like, community college teachers are truly passionate about teaching, and it's one of the rare spaces in academia where it's not all about the research. It's not all about how many citations you have or getting in X journal or Y journal. At many of these large research universities that are not only 4-year but offer master's and PhD programs, the professors will teach like one class a semester and are always on sabbatical and stuff like that. These community college professors that I had were teaching 3, 4, some of them 5 classes. And I had such a great experience there at community college. And you're right about everything you say, Philip, you often see, and I see this as a teacher, I teach a lot of high school seniors, and many students who go off to college have no idea why they're even going. They're going in many cases because that's what you're supposed to do. Yep. And then the guidance counselor helps you pick a major and off you go to your, basically 4 years of partying and studying some subject that you don't really even know if you're passionate about. As you say, when a student graduates and then works for a little while or joins the military, or I was often in classes at a community college, and you know this well, you'll often be in classes with military people. You'll be in classes with people who go to school at night, who have full-time jobs, adults who are like 33, 34, 35 years, sometimes in their 40s.
I had a
and
lot
50s.
of retirees. I think my oldest student might have been 88.
Yeah.
I had like 14-year-olds taking like college courses,
It is
college
so
credits in high
diverse.
school.
And you meet all these
all in one class.
people, and you're right, the people who didn't go straight to college as this sort of knee-jerk rote thing that you do, they are often filled with fire and passion, and they know exactly why they want to be there, and they've got this mission, whereas it's a kind of, in some sense, not to insult anyone, the kids who go straight to college and aren't necessarily like scholars or like really dedicated and have always I want to become a doctor or whatever.
Right, they're just doing it because that's what you do.
That's what you do.
Step.
And there's often you see a kind of listlessness with many of those students. But I'll say lastly, and then hand it off to you. At community college, I had so many opportunities. I started the philosophy club. I was in the environmentalist club. I was secretary of student government. You're a big fish in a small pond. Yep. And you have so many opportunities. And I was taking a wide range of really interesting classes. I can't recommend community college highly enough. I wish more students would decide to save money and go the 2-year route and get their associate's degree and then go, because it's very easy.
You can explore a little more too, like figure out what you're really passionate about. And not feel like, oh, you're in this really expensive school and you're like in this major and you feel stuck because if you change majors, you might spend more time there. And
an associate's degree in liberal arts allows you to explore if you're not one of those students who comes thinking I'm going to be a nurse and there's a very specific, program for that.
Right.
That leads to a job, and that's cool. It's fantastic. If you have that clarity and you have that, you have that goal. But a lot of students, even those who come right out of high school, community college is a great option is to just do liberal arts for 2 years. And like you said, people who are not from the United States may not know what community colleges are, but essentially they are institutions of higher learning that are much more affordable. They are in part funded by the state or the county. Occasionally, some federal dollars come in as well, but that makes them much more affordable than your typical four-year institution where you go to get your bachelor's degree. So the community college will confer a two-year degree, an associate's. We can function as the first half of a bachelor's degree, and it's typically much more affordable. So yeah, I mean, it's just a great option too. I have a lot of really brilliant students who could have gone a number of places, but choose to go to the community college because they want to save a lot of money. You know, it's particularly if you're a humanities person like we are. If you emerge from your bachelor's degree $100,000, $150,000 in debt, you know, and what kind of job are you going to get to be able to pay that off? You know, that's going to be rugged, right? So community college is a good option for that. But Nikki, why was Jordan wrong about fantasy? What why was his idea about fantasy, which by the way is a very common, I think,
it is common
among people who don't read fantasy. Let's talk about you know, where that comes from, that perception, and why it's wrong, and what fantasy actually does offer. Both of you can comment on that, but Nikki, you want to start us on that?
Well, at that time, I think it was there's part of the perception of it's nerdy, whereas today it's like cool to be nerdy and to be like into things like that. But that's a pretty recent development, like the last 10 years or so.
Right. So, like nerds used to get shoved into lockers and used to be given swirlies, and now the nerds are the cool kids.
But they're not giving anybody swirlies, I think.
No.
And I think there's also the perception that fantasy can't be literary, that it's not deep, that it's just, why bother reading it if you can watch like an action movie or watch a fantasy movie, or just what am I going to get out of it? If I go to a cocktail party, can I brag about this fantasy novel I just finished reading? Or do
I would, and probably you would, but yeah.
But like, what was it, Jordan? Why didn't you want to read fantasy?
Yeah, I think you're so right about all of that. I guess for me, at that time, I was into like suburban American fiction, French existentialism. So Dostoevsky and Jean-Paul Sartre and Albert Camus and the other existentialists. I was reading a ton of Nietzsche. I've probably read everything Nietzsche's ever written. I was reading Dostoevsky and Maurice Merleau-Ponty and Martin Buber. And so I fashioned myself an intellectual who read very highbrow, serious things. You know, when I read a novel, I was reading, you know, John Updike and Faulkner and all this other stuff. And so I had this arrogant sense of myself as a real intellectual who reads the New Yorker and the, you know, Claremont Review of Books, and who, you know, can't be bothered with this juvenile stuff. And I couldn't have been more wrong. I know, it's so silly. And that's just, you know, what I was like as a younger man.
And I pushed him a little bit at a time. It was like baby steps. So like it took me about a year to get him to watch Buffy the Vampire Slayer with me.
That was the beginning of it. I was like, okay, that's stupid. That name sounds so dumb. And that is silly. And I'm a serious person. I'm watching that. And she said, no, give it a chance. And then I started watching that and I said, this is brilliant. The writing is brilliant. Why did they name it that?
Buffy
was your gateway. Okay.
It was my gateway, actually. Yeah. Surprisingly. What was next? What did you get me with next?
You read some Thomas Mann.
Yeah, that's not fantasy though.
Yeah.
His titles sound like fantasy, which is why you said that. Magic Mountain. I was reading Thomas Mann. No, that was part of my arrogant, like, I read Thomas Mann. I don't read Neil Gaiman. No, I had a terrible attitude about that. And bit by bit, she got me.
What was the first fantasy you read?
So I believe it was Lord of the Rings. Then it was Harry Potter. Then it was Dune. And I just, over time, I became a fantasy and sci-fi person. Alistair Reynolds, Carl Sagan's Contact. I remember bit by bit. And
did I get you to read his Dark Materials, or did you not do that?
No, we read.
Did we read that out loud?
We read that out loud.
We did.
Nice.
And that was part of it, is that we developed this thing together, this way of spending time together, where we would say, okay, let's try this. This week, instead of watching television in the evening, let's read Harry Potter out loud.
I
And then
love
we
it.
read all of the books out loud, because that was just more edifying and more enriching
Did
and
you
a better
take
way to spend
turns
our time.
reading? Did you take turns reading to each
Yeah.
other?
Mostly.
Yeah.
He likes to listen to
Uh-huh.
books, and I have a hard time listening to books. I need to see it with my eyes. I'm very
It
visual.
was 70-30.
Yeah, so I read a little more out loud than he did,
Yeah.
but that was in part because I like to see the words.
Yeah, I'm the same. I don't do audiobooks very well yet. I've tried a couple times and I
Yeah,
always
I end up by
say,
default, it's so sad too. I end up not liking the book as much. And I'm
yeah.
like, if I read this with my eyes, would I appreciate it more?
Mm.
Probably I would have.
Or what
And
do you, I have the feeling I would just soak it in more if
yeah,
I'm reading it.
I'm only allowing myself to listen to certain things, and it's only because I have a long commute. And so
Uh-huh. Yeah.
I've listened to most of A Song of Ice and Fire just because it's like, well, I'd already seen the show.
Okay.
And it's like, so the names are familiar. A lot of the stuff is familiar. And so I kind of know where it's going. And so
Yeah.
if I like zone out for a minute to think about what I'm doing for like planning out my day in my head, because that's what happens a lot. Like, what's the
That's
next
what I
thing I
would
have to do?
do.
What about this lesson? And then I like, so I need to do something that I'm sort of familiar with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
fair. Yeah. I love this story of you two and Nikki, you opening up Jordan gradually to fantasy as a legitimate literary experience, as worthy of critical exploration. It's the whole reason I have a YouTube channel, really, is just me saying, hey, this is literature. This is great storytelling. This can be explored critically. So yeah, I mean, it's just fantastic. I love this kind of story.
Well, can you tell me your story a little bit, Philip? Because what I want to hear is you ended up being like in a small handful cadre of professors who teach fantasy, much like AP. I have listened to the lectures of Michael D.C. Drought,
Yeah,
folks like Tom Shippey. You're in this group of professors who deal with fantasy literature intellectually, and you actually have taught courses in fantasy literature. And so how did you make that turn? Because I suspect that when you got your PhD, you got a PhD, correct?
yep.
And I suspect that when you did that, you weren't getting your PhD in Tolkien, although I know some people have done that. You were doing Old English and Middle English and stuff like that. So how did you get into this, and how did you make that turn toward fantasy? Sorry, I know this is your show. I'm like
Oh,
interviewing you here, but I'm really
that's
curious
great.
to know how you did that. Were you nervous about making that turn in academia, where it's often there's a kind of prejudice against the genre? Yeah, tell
Yeah.
me about that.
Yeah, no, that's it. First of all, tables turned, fair enough. But yeah, I met Michael Drought at a conference in Kalamazoo, Michigan, which is where a big medievalist conference happens every year. And he was organizing a reading of Beowulf, and anyone who wanted to come along and read some of the lines could recite. And I participated in that and that reading of Beowulf. So I doubt he remembers me from that, but yeah, I love that he does what he does. He's a very well-known Tolkien scholar. I had the huge pleasure of talking with Tom Shippey on my channel
Never saw that.
last
Okay.
year. Yeah, last year he did his translation of Beowulf. And so of course we talked about Tolkien as well. But yeah, it was one of my huge highlights of my YouTube career. If I
He's got
can
to be in
call.
his 80s, right? At this point.
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
he's in his 80s. Yeah, still very sharp.
Hmm.
And yeah, that translation is what I would consider to be what the first I'd recommend to anyone who wants to read Beowulf. And he did it with a scholar named Leonard Nydorf, who did a lot of the essays and stuff that you'll see in here, a lot of the editorial stuff. But I think it's mainly Shippey's translation and edition that you'll find. So it's a facing page. You've got the Old English and you've got the translation here, which is a really good translation. If you want to know, without learning Old English, if you really want to know what probably the poet's original intent was, as best we can figure out, I think Shippey's translation is the best one out there. But anyway, I digress.
Do you read that with your students?
I've taught Beowulf before, and I actually did a unit. This is when I was teaching in Chicopee. I did a unit with my seniors where we did Beowulf, and then we actually did Grendel after that.
Oh, John Gardner's Grendel.
Yeah, yeah, John Gardner's Grendel. Actually, John Gardner was one of the reasons I chose the college I did because he was a professor there.
Oh,
Yeah,
no kidding. Huh.
yeah, yeah. But yeah, so I have taught Beowulf, but I don't pretend in any way to have anywhere near an iota of the knowledge that you have about Beowulf. So I taught it very much as a sort of working, roll your sleeves up high school English teacher. I taught it to a bunch of kids. I was teaching at a high needs urban school at the time. And so it was a battle just to get them to be interested and want to read. So I taught it more as now I teach at a very academic school now, but at the time I taught it almost like, guys, this is like a superhero movie. This is like an action flick, okay? And it's going to jump off the page and we're going to have fun with it. And that's what we did. It was lovely. But I didn't teach it in the way that I would want to teach it, or certainly in the way that you could.
Yeah, another way you could do that is that Old English poetry in many ways is a lot like rap. A lot.
Yeah.
In that it comes from oral formulaic tradition, and it is
Want
something.
to recite some for us in your best rappers? Could you recite some Beowulf?
I don't know if I could do it like a rapper, but you know,
Do you know any off the top of your head that you could recite for us?
Yeah, I could just the opening lines of Beowulf.
Oh, let's hear it.
You know, What way garden in dagam föd kynninga frim jafrunan, who the Atherlingas Ellen fremedan, right? So
Wow.
there's a very
Sounds
regular.
like a little like Elvish.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
A little bit.
But yeah, no, that's Old English. That's English from, probably more than 1,000 years ago, is what.
Otherwise known as Anglo-Saxon.
Yeah, you can call it Anglo-Saxon too. Yep. But yeah, so that's my jam. That's my wheelhouse. My PhD is in English literature, but I'm a medievalist. So obviously I'm interested in fantasy. Now, AP, you mentioned AP, his PhD is in fantasy literature. So there is a legitimate slice of academia out there where you can do fantasy. I'm not going to pretend that it's easy necessarily to find jobs in that field, because there's a lot of us who would love to do that. But it's there, for people who want to pursue it at that level, it's there. I love that fact. But as you said, I've gotten into fantasy. I've taught a course at my community college. I actually created that course at my community college in fantasy novels. Taught it a number of times, changing up what books we include that semester, sometimes making it a sort of thematically based thing. Where my favorite example is when I had a semester where we basically all the books were related in some way, shape, or form to colonization and imperialism and stuff like that. So we read Gardens of the Moon by Stephen Erickson.
Right.
We read The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. We read N.K. Jemison's The Fifth Season. There are all these books that were somehow linked into these common themes. It worked brilliantly. Fantasy as a lens to first distance yourself, so achieve that psychic distance from the real world, where it's often too painful, or we're just too attached to our perspectives to get that distance that we need to look at things with clarity. Fantasy allows us to do that. You can look at a situation of oppression in a fantasy world, and without any attachment, understand that situation. And then you come back to our world and you, with greater clarity, understand the situations of our world. That's literature. I mean, that it can do that, So yeah, it's not a space that I still feel is recognized by a majority of people in academia as legitimate necessarily. In other words, there's still a lot of snobbery about it, but I think more so than in the past. You can stake a claim in academia to this territory and explore it and enjoy it, and without necessarily coming across all the time that assertion that it's not real literature or that it's garbage or whatever. You still, I did a video a couple years back on an essay that Salman Rushdie had written, and I really love his fiction, by the way. Midnight's Children is a great book, and of course I wish him the best in his continued recovery from the attack.
Stabbed in the head.
Yeah, yeah. But he wrote an essay where, and you come across this too, authors who do use the fantastic, like Salman Rushdie, in their writing, distancing themselves from this pulp stuff, this genre fiction.
I do magical realism. It's not fantasy. I'm in the tradition of Gabriel Garcia Marquez.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I don't enjoy that when I hear that kind of. I regard it as snobbery. I understand that Rushdie and others like him who stake out that claim are trying to be taken seriously. They want to be taken seriously, and they should be. They absolutely should be. But I feel it's unfortunate because there are writers like Neil Gaiman you mentioned earlier who, he straddles that genre fiction, or is it, I've taught short stories by him, in Intro to Lit, or Ursula Le Guin is a great example of a author who has gotten some, at least, recognition as a serious, I'm putting air quotes for those of you who are listening, as a serious author. But I prefer to have a much more broad look. I consider, authors like Stephen Erickson, very well that I'm a huge fan of the Malazan books. And I don't think you can find a series that incorporates so seamlessly so much philosophy and so much just about life that the Malazan does. So it's why not look at fantasy as a playground, but also as a place for serious consideration of life and experiences and all that. It's just, that's how I feel anyway.
Yeah, and I would say too that there's a way of looking at fantasy literature where you begin to realize that many of the same sort of movements have taken place within fantasy and sci-fi literature, say, or we could call it speculative fiction.
Sure.
You have a tradition of postmodernism in fantasy literature. You have modernism in fantasy literature.
Yeah.
You have I don't know, like Neil Gaiman going back and incorporating like fairy tales and myths into his stories and things like that. You have a lot of the same sort of movements, and you have a realist tradition in fantasy literature. Something like George R.R. Martin very much writes like a 20th century realist novelist.
And my contention is that grimdark, my way of seeing it, not everyone's going to agree with me, but grimdark is actually fantasy's version or answer to existentialism. You mentioned existentialism. Essentially, the universe has no intrinsic meaning, but it is possible for us as individuals to carve meaning out of our world by doing, by acting, by connecting, and with others, and that's grimdark. Grimdark.
Absolutely.
Where you have this world that has no meaning and it's hostile even and it's trying to rip away meaning from you all the time, and sometimes you lose and but it's the meaning and the heroism is in trying, in just getting out of bed in the morning, strapping on your sword, putting on your boots and going out there and facing it. That's heroism in and of itself, and that's meaning right there. That's, to me, grimdark is because you mentioned existentialism.
Yeah, I totally agree with your characterization of that. And boy, you have me thinking on that one, because that's it. You would obviously know this since you're talking about it. The sort of slogan, as you say, in existentialism is existence precedes essence. The idea that first you are, to use a Heideggerian term, you're thrown into the world. Existentialists call this thrownness, and you find yourself in this world that is absurd and futile, and well, it feels that way. And as you say, existentialists believe that the world is inherently devoid of meaning, that you actually have to create your own meaning, right? So I would say that matches up very nicely with the sort of what I'm seeing as a through line through the works of grimdark that I've read. But
Yeah.
then, as you say, if you can directly contrast that to something that's more Tolkienian,
Yes.
classic, traditional, high epic fantasy, where it's exactly
Exactly.
the opposite. It is that essence precedes existence. The world has a meaning. You
Yep.
have a telos, you have a purpose. And your goal in life is not to create your own meaning, but to discover what your destiny and purpose is. And therein lies the quest and all of that. So I really do think that you're right, that grimdark is providing a kind of existential answer to some of the traditionalist themes and archetypes in fantasy. Yeah.
Yep. Yep. That's what I've been arguing, and a lot of people have told me I'm nuts. But
No,
Makes me
that's
want to read more grimdark.
that's smart.
I
Yeah.
yeah.
hadn't thought of it that
Well, I
way.
bought you Joe Abercrombie. Neither of us have read Joe
There's so
Abercrombie.
much on my
Really?
list that I just haven't gotten to yet.
Yeah.
There's only so much
I
time.
know.
That's the problem. That's the problem. I
As
actually
Harold
have to
Bloom
say,
says, he who reads must
I
choose.
know.
that's for sure. But Mark Lawrence is an author who actually helped me to see that, I would say, the most. I love Abercrombie. First Law is brilliant. That's a series that would be incredibly bleak and depressing if it weren't for one thing. His humor is just, it's tremendous. And somehow that saves it from being suffocating. But otherwise, you have characters who keep trying and failing over and over. They want to be better people, and it's just like, no, the world's not set up for you to be better. It just keeps knocking you back down.
Well, tell me why you like Mark Lawrence. I'm interested to hear about that because I sampled a little bit from, what was his first
Red
book?
Sister?
No, Prince of Thorns.
Broken Empire. The Prince of Thorns is the first book. Yeah.
Yeah, I read about I don't know, an eighth of that book. I read, I don't know, 50 pages or something like that.
Yeah.
And I was both very, very impressed, but also like, I don't know if I can finish this book. When it's hard to read a book when you so strongly dislike the main character.
Yeah.
And again, I think it's so important to have characters like that and to remind people your main character can be a piece of crap. Your main character can be a dastardly, rapacious, licentious fool. And that doesn't mean that you have to close the book because you don't like the main character. Some of my favorite characters are dastardly characters. So for some reason at the time, I wasn't ready for it. I think I could come back to it and enjoy it. Why do you like Mark Lawrence? Because again, that's my only experience with him.
Sure. Yeah, no, the Broken Empire, first of all, is his only true grimdark series. The rest of his trilogy, a lot of people think Mark Lawrence equals grimdark, but actually most of his books are not grimdark. They may be dark fantasy, but they're not grimdark. And so that's really one caveat here with Lawrence. Now, it's specific to the Broken Empire. It is absolutely the case that Jorg is a complete douchebag. He's an awful human being. What's interesting to me is, and I think you only get this if you read the whole trilogy, but you won't get this from just the first book. But if you read the whole trilogy and you look at what you learn about this character along the way, your perceptions about Jorg are going to shift. Not that you're excusing any of the stuff that he does, not that you're even empathizing with him necessarily. You might
can see his humanity.
You can see his humanity. You can understand, oh, this is where he's coming from. This is what happens to a person who goes through this trauma. And there was something incredibly cathartic about that. Now, it's a public, it's well known, so I don't think I'm revealing anything here. Mark Lawrence has talked about this trilogy being, without him even understanding it while he was writing it, his response to his youngest child being born with a severely debilitating condition, and seeing her pain and her suffering, and it was a kind of an anger response on some level as well. And I actually feel that helps me understand this trilogy a lot more too. That Jorg is responding to pain. He's responding to suffering in a way that's incredibly unhealthy. But given what he was handed, it not excused, but it kind of makes sense when you see it, how it plays out. And what happens to him in the end, I think you feel more connected to him. I think, at least I did at the end of that journey as a person. I found it to be a very profound exploration of human psychology and trauma and suffering and pain. And it's not a series that everybody would want to read. You know, if you're, you know, somebody who's been through a lot and you're trying to just escape and feel better, you don't read Broken Empire. But his other books are just profoundly, I feel, Lawrence has this ability, and it's a rare ability. I read some authors because they make me think, they challenge me, and those books tend to read slowly. They tend to be books that I can't just rip through. I can't read them on an airplane necessarily, you know, because I need to really focus on them. And I read other books because they're fun and they're entertaining and they're page turners, and that's great. Lawrence does both for me. I'm just wanting to get through the story, but the whole time I'm thinking. And that's a rare thing to have both in the same author somehow, and he does it very concisely as well. So he does that in every trilogy of his. I've read 3 of his trilogies plus the first 2 books in the library trilogy. So I've read a total of 11 books by him at this point, and every single book has been that way for me.
Hey, he likes you too, because
Yeah,
he
yeah.
recommends your book. He gave your book a blurb. He's a
He
big
did.
Philip Chase fan. So
That's right. Yeah, well, I don't know
very
if
cool.
that's the right word, but I was extremely thrilled to have Mark Lawrence read. He's read the first 2 books actually, in the Adan trilogy, and I have his blurb. I have actually his on the cover, even a piece of his blurb. So
And then you're a judge in some sort of indie fantasy contest that he runs, aren't you?
yes, SPFBO. So the self-published fantasy blog off. And it's a really important contest that he started basically just to lend a hand to self-published authors. He talks about how he basically felt like incredibly grateful to have been picked up by a publisher and to have had the opportunity to have a career as a writer, and maybe a sort of a survivor's guilt or something, but just incredibly kind of him to start this contest. He gets nothing from it really, except he helps shine a light on self-published fantasy, and it's, I think, the premier contest out there for fantasy authors. Something you might want to consider if you end up self-publishing,
Big
you know,
time.
is entering SPIFBO. This year is SPFBO 10. So if you do the Roman numeral 10, it's an X. So we're calling it Spiff Box. So
Oh, I kind of liked Spiffbo. I was thinking of like a really spiffy boyfriend.
Well, we'll probably be more ready for Spiff Bowl.
yeah.
Ooh,
Nice.
yeah, I like that.
Yeah. So, but
Or
anyway,
would it
yeah,
be boy?
Spiff boy.
Yeah, but I mean,
I like bull. That's really cool.
yeah. But anyway, yeah, it's a privilege to be a judge for that. You know, in this case, 300 books get entered. There are 10 panels of judges, and each panel of judges gets 30 books. And I basically, as a judge, whether I were on my own or this year I have a team, we winnow down those 30 books to one finalist from our
so
group.
are they excerpts or like the entire thing?
The whole book, the whole book. So yeah, it's a lot of reading. It's a lot of reading. But yeah, usually Lawrence gives a lot of leeway to the judges in terms of how they do it, but most of us will have semifinalists, like 5 or 6 semifinalists. And then among those, so those kind of get highlighted, then we'll pick one finalist. So obviously there'll be 10 finalists, and all the judges from all 10 panels will read those 10 finalists and score them. And the one with the highest rank is the winner of the contest. And you can imagine that the winner gets a lot of press. The finalists, the 10 finalists, all get a lot of recognition. And you know, there's some well-known books out there that were self-published that have done very well off of this contest, like Sword of Kaigen, for example, is one. And sometimes get picked up by publishers as well. It didn't win, but Josiah Bancroft's Silent Ascents is another example of a book that was in the contest, went pretty far, and got some traction and got picked up by a publisher, you know. So it's something that can happen too. but it's great. It's a lot of work, but it's a privilege to be part of the contest. Yeah. Yeah, I'm also excited because Mark Lawrence wrote a foreword for me for the special edition.
Oh, no
Ooh.
way.
For the Way of a Dan.
That
So
is so cool.
yeah,
Very cool.
yeah,
Very cool. What an honor, man. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
yeah. I'm really excited about that. Yeah, and it's cool because being a writer and networking as you and I, the two of you and I do, being part of YouTube, we're part of a community. Authors get involved sometimes, and I've had the incredible, experience of talking to some of my heroes, like Jenny Wirtz and Stephen Erickson and Ian Esselmont and Mark Lawrence and others. And it's just, wow, really cool. John Gwynn is another one I've gotten to talk to, so
Yeah.
Yeah, I got to
yeah.
talk to C.S. Friedman. That was so much fun.
Oh, yeah. See, you know exactly what I mean. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's so cool. So yeah, to be part of that is really awesome. But you guys are working. Let's talk about your book for a bit. And as much as you can tell me, I know it's still a project that is, in the works in some sense. You've got a finished draft. You've been working with an editor, and you are co-writing this thing. What can you tell us about it? What's the title? What's it about? Give us your, not your elevator pitch. We have longer than that. Give us a sense of what this is about.
Well, it's called The Green Druid, and it's been in the making for years now, maybe like 6 years we've been working on it.
Yep.
And
In our very limited spare time. So it's summers, winter breaks.
yeah, and yeah.
It's not like 6 years straight.
Yeah.
It's probably all told a year and a half of actual, just like an author writing a book, maybe, if that.
Yeah.
Mostly
Which
our
is
breaks. Yeah.
about right to finish a book. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it started out when Jordan took some creative writing classes, and he got this idea that he really wanted to write this story that focused on a father and a daughter, and it was going to be very philosophical.
Okay.
And that was kind of the seed for it. And over time, as we talked about it, it evolved into fantasy. And the father was going to be like a kind of powerful sorcerer type.
Cool.
Right. And
Love it.
and the daughter is like, his apprentice, but she's very much like just kind of princess in a tower. She doesn't have like a lot of freedom, a lot of flexibility. She only knows his way.
Yeah.
She's very like kind of new to the world. Like she's just like inexperienced in that sense.
Yeah. The concept was kind of like, okay, what if you have the classic trope of the princess trapped in a tower, right?
Yeah.
Rapunzel or whatever. And what if like she actually hates her life? So it's not just the classic it's not just the what would you call it, damsel in distress or something like that. She has a modern sensibility, and she realizes that she's basically a princess who's being held at the in a tower, and she resents her father for that, and she resents the fact that she's lonely, and she feels like she has so much potential. And the father, I designed him based on Nietzsche. As I said before, I was reading a lot of Nietzsche.
Wow.
He's very Nietzschean.
So the way we started it is we started it by building out the world, building out the map. And we're like, okay, this region is going to have kind of this philosophy. Okay, so we have the Nietzschean villain over out east. And then out west, we're like, that's going to be like Plato's Republic.
Okay.
And then we have like the anarchist place. We have like the Alan Watts kind of Buddhist place. Like we have
I want to hang out there. I want to hang out.
So we have all these different philosophies that we want our characters to eventually encounter on their journey.
Okay.
And so we're starting book one with kind of the Nietzschean philosophy out east, and then Plato's Republic out west, but it's like a really kind of ramped up dystopian. Well, Plato's Republic kind of was dystopian, but it's really like ramped up.
It's like a combination of Plato's Republic and all the worst aspects of the class system in Plato's Republic, the myth of the metals, the the noble lie.
Yeah, it's
And
very corrupt.
it's a very stratified society where you have the philosopher kings at the top, you have the military class in the middle, they're silver souls. The philosopher kings are the gold souls, and then you have this vast, lower class. They're very similar to the proles in 1984. So it's I designed it to be a combination of the French First Republic, where you have this very revolutionary, this very reason-based, in during the French Revolution, you had these philosophes and these thinkers who were saying, let's destroy the old gods. Let's start the calendar over at year 0. We're going to develop a cult of reason. We're going to overthrow the priests. I forget what that famous Denis Diderot quote was, that you hang the last king with the entrails of the last priest, or something like that. So this is a society that began with a very revolutionary sort of top down. We don't need God. We don't need faith traditions. We're going to rip all of that foundational stuff out of our society, and we're going to start over, tabula rasa, from scratch. So it's the French First Republic and Plato's Republic, and ramped up to be a little more dystopian.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the Nietzschean character, to add a little spin to Nietzsche's philosophy. Nietzsche, of course, was an atheist. We have the Nietzschean sorcerer villain in the East who has left that society, and he is trying to raise the old gods. So this new revolutionary society crushed the gods and banished them from the society, killed the druids, banished the rest of them, and said, we are a secular republic that is based on reason. Of course, they're anything but reasonable.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you have the Nietzschean sorcerer who is disgruntled from the way things went down when he lived in this society. He has some very interesting connections to this society, and his mission is to go out, learn the old ways, revive magic, and revive the gods out in the East, and his daughter is going to help him do that.
And so our main characters, we have a boy from the West and a girl from the East, and their stories are going to collide.
Okay. All right.
And
So that's the backdrop. You told me about the backdrop, and these two characters, young characters. There's a boy too. We'll have to talk a little about him as well, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
But it sounds like the girl, the daughter, is leaving a kind of womb-like space there in that tower, right? And so, how much? Obviously, there's going to be action and adventure, and it's a fantasy. We got to have that stuff, right? So would you describe hers as a kind of hero's journey as well, or does that apply in this case?
Yeah. So she does get out and see some of the world.
Okay.
The big journey is we primarily focus on the boy character in this first book. Like, she's a bit of a secondary character, and he enters into a military academy, so he's trained as a soldier. But he ends up making his way to the East. Yeah,
he's got a mission to the East, to basically take out this suspected druid who is basically the inner sanctum of the Philosophers Guild. I won't give too much away. I'll just say this. They are worried because they have heard reports that there is a movement rising in the East to bring back the old gods, that there's this sorcerer who is basically trying to build alliances out East with, there's a sultanate like in the Southeast. There are these different smattering of kingdoms and things like that. This guy is trying to build a bloc, an alliance, to take on this very powerful dystopian society out West. And they hear about this, and they're like, the best way to deal with this is right now to have a team of specialists, and my main character Soren is one of them, to go take out this druid and kill him before this thing grows. And so that's why he has
opposing sides. Then the boy and the girl are on opposing sides.
Opposing sides.
Yeah. Nice.
And he did. I think one of the key things here with this book is he disagrees with his society. She disagrees with her father's philosophy. And they meet in the middle. They do meet at toward the end of the book, or
I would hope so.
3/4 of the way through the book, he goes on his big epic hero's journey. They do meet and come into contact, but of course, we may disagree with our society. right? We may disagree with its values, but let's say you have a person who is American, who is from the United States, but they disagree with the philosophy of the United States. They disagree with the founders or something like that.
They're not all totally on board with capitalism or whatever.
Sure, whatever. They're not on board with our economic system, whatever it is. And yet, with that person, isn't it interesting that if they travel over to the UK and someone starts to insult the United States,
You defend it. Yeah.
There's something in you that just resents that. So it's this interesting thing where he doesn't like his society, she hates her father's philosophy, and yet when they meet, you would think they would have tons in common. They actually start fighting.
Of course.
Instantly. It's like, oh yeah, you think our ways are oppressive and that we believe in inequality because we want to let people use magic. And I mean, his argument is basically like, you want a society where this cadre of shadowy elites get to use magic and basically establish a theocracy on the basis of the power that the gods give them. We believe in equality out in the West, and she's basically calling him a communist. You know what I mean? Like a stultifying equality where actually Stalin lives in a great palace. You know what I mean? Like,
it sounds so remarkably applicable to our world.
Equally starving, right? So they start arguing, and it's great. It's great. We're having a good time with it. But as you said, we're not quite done yet because we submitted to AP because he's the best in it is. We chose AP because of your testimony and because of his reputation and how brilliant the guy is.
He is.
And we thought, okay, he's gonna help us shape this thing into no, he ripped our book apart. And we appreciate it.
Yeah. And so he pretty much gave us permission to step back, go back to the drawing board. And so we're re-outlining and we're trying to think of like, okay, like we got to tighten this up.
Yes.
What's important to keep in? What do we have to amplify? And so we had to really step back with it.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we haven't really been able to work on it at all this summer because I'm developing a new course, an online course for the fall. So I've been building that out all summer long.
A lot of work. Yeah.
And so he's been really nice and not working on the book because like I'd feel like left out.
Yeah.
He was working on it without me. So we're taking a little pause, but hopefully.
But it's a matter of audience, right? I mean, who do you want your audience to be, I guess? Is that something you're kind of wrestling with as well in the process of revising?
I think we have a good idea of who we want our audience to be. The biggest problem was the way that we wrote the book. We kind of started out like we were playing, like we were like, let's start here. We're going to get over here. Then we're going to get over here. And then we kind of didn't know where it was going till we got to the end. And so then we got to the end and we went back to the beginning and we're like, okay, let's try to balance this out. We need an extra chapter here. We need this there. This is how it builds. And it kind of just ballooned is what happened.
And so it ended up being super bloated. But the other thing is, I think I could precisely state who I'm hoping our audience will be, which is we're trying to, at the end of this book, I want us to produce a book that is fun to read in the page turning plot sense, but also has the depth of something like an R. Scott Baker, right? So I would like for it to have the page turning quality of being like unput downable or whatever you might say, but also something that is thought provoking and that incorporates a lot of the big ideas. And again, we didn't know what we were doing. So when we started writing this, we wrote it like, okay, well, he's traveling from here to here. So we need a chapter for every step of the way. And so we have a chapter for like each town that he goes through. And it's like, that's not good plotting. And it wasn't working. And AP really was able to spot that. And so it's not going totally back to the drawing board. There's a lot of chapters we're going to keep. And
we have a lot built out.
Yeah.
We know who our characters are. We are very
your world.
Yes.
We told the readers way too much, but at least now we know that stuff. Like we're solid on that because we wrote it all out, but we don't need to give that all to them.
This is going to be the opposite. I remember Brandon Sanderson once said that he approaches world building as if he's inserting like a new tile under the feet of the direction his character is walking. Like he's literally laying the pavement as they're walking through, and so he does it in this haphazard fashion. It's going to be the opposite for us. Going back to the drawing board, this world is actually one of the first comments we sent it to one agent at the very early on in the process.
Yeah, years ago now.
As soon as we finished the book, we just sent it off to Matt Bialer. I just wanted to hear what someone like Matt would think of it. We did get the full request and all of that. And we got he made a bunch of comments that were constructive criticism and things we really needed to improve.
That's really great feedback.
But one of the compliments he gave us was, this world feels real and lived in. And that made me really happy to hear that, among the things that he said sucked about it as well.
Right. No, that's fantastic.
And the magic's cool.
The magic system is cool.
Okay.
So we got that.
He said you really need to find a developmental editor. And that's basically why we went to go see AP. And we actually have a little running deal with him that when we fix what AP told us to do, we can resubmit to him and he'll read it again.
Nice. Yeah, of course. I wish you the best with that. That's awesome. The way you have described all this, I think, is very helpful for people who are thinking about writing themselves, or maybe in the middle of writing, because I also spent many years, 18 plus, working on my trilogy, and again, primarily summers. You know how that is. Yep. But it is something that I feel at the end of the day, if you want to have a great story that appeals to a fairly broad audience, you have to keep doing this. You're doing exactly what you should be doing, in my opinion. To me, I think the idea maybe fairly common that, hey, you just write a book and you press save and you send it out there.
Yeah, we keep getting, oh, it's not done yet. You guys aren't finished with this yet. Like, how long does it take?
Family members are like, are you going to, our friends recently said, are you going to be the type of authors who always have this book that they're going to publish and you're never going to submit it and you're just going to have it in your desk drawer forever? And I'm like, dude, no.
But you only get one first book.
Yes.
And so we want it to be as good as it can possibly be.
Yeah.
It's going to take iterations. I'm seeing this as our like third iteration.
Yeah.
Oh, I totally relate. And you mentioned, Nikki, Jordan's being kind and not working on it while you're busy. Have there been challenges, and what have been the benefits of working together on a novel?
Oh, being able to, like, after a day of writing, we read out loud what we've just written and we kind of pace around and we talk about it and then we develop new ideas. Like, it's so nice to be able to like just bounce ideas off of each other.
Yeah.
And like, there's not really any getting stuck because the other person can kind of help you get out of it.
That's so
cool.
There's
been like no friction in the creative process.
With Google Docs, it's so easy to be just, because like we'll just like, we'll kind of leapfrog chapters. Like we'll each be working on a different chapter.
Yeah.
So
has this actually brought you closer together working on it? Yeah. That's beautiful. That's really beautiful. Because I can see a lot of times couples trying to do this could be like, no, I want this passage here, like, So, but this has been, you've been able to avoid that sort of thing and
there's debating. We debate over things. We'll leave something in and then I'll look back at it and I'll say, God, you were right about that. Yeah. And I think our work on the book has literally been, if it's even possible to know this, 50-50. Like we've found a way to, I think our mark on the book has been about 50-50. And I think we're both fans of epistemic humility. We each know what our strengths are. We know where we're strong. We know where we're weakest. We
couldn't do it otherwise.
Right. Yeah. And so there have been debates and discussions, but it's been a really like smooth process and I just can't wait. It has brought us closer together.
And it's fun to work on. It's fun to get into the world, and
it's a hobby. Some couples have travel, some couples have, they take cooking lessons or whatever. This has been a really nice way to spend time together.
Yeah.
That is so beautiful.
I will say that time goes by way too fast when you're writing.
Yes.
Sit down and you look up, you're like, the whole day's done? Really?
Nope. Oh, I know exactly what you mean.
That's the downside of it.
Yeah. Oh, you're in the flow. You're in this flow.
Yes.
and time is irrelevant. You know,
Yeah.
it's kind of cool actually, but that's so beautiful that this has brought you closer, that working on this. That's fantastic. And then you mentioned epistemic humility, which I personally feel is essential if you're going to be a writer, if you're going to publish books. So you're able to listen to somebody like AP, and there is a temptation to be like, oh no, this is my baby. How dare you criticize my baby? But the fact of the matter is, we need those eyes on
Yeah,
our.
you need those fresh eyes, because like we kind of did all we could until up to that point
Yep.
with it, just the two of us, because it's like
We're too close to it.
too close to it. We know things that aren't in there anymore. It's like hard to take a step back and know what's like
Oh,
how
exactly.
it comes off to someone else.
That's right. Because one thing that no one talks about that we should probably talk about more is there were chapters that I thought were riveting and gripping and utterly vital to the story. And, oh, I'm interested in this. Like, I could write a chapter that features my main character, and he could be doing nothing for the entire chapter, and I would be very entertained by it, because it's an exploration of these interesting thoughts he's having. And it was nice to have a neutral third party come in and say that is inessential to the story, and it's really going to make readers feel like it's lagging here. You know,
I had a similar thing when AP looked at my books. He noticed a habit of mine that I didn't even realize was there, which was I like starting off chapters with a character alone and just kind of being with their thoughts. And he was like, this is, how about putting another person there and making it a dialogue that would make it so much more interesting.
Yeah. He noticed one of our bad habits, and that's because we have this date and location system. And so we can jump around time into different characters and stuff. And we would open up a lot of our chapters like while you're there in the scene, and then we would back up and like summarize what happened in the off the page that the reader didn't get in the intro. And so like we did that too much.
And I was reading his comments, and I was imagining his snarky Scottish accent telling me, "We don't need
Irish,
to do that."
dude.
Oh, sorry, Northern Ireland, right?
Northern Ireland, yes.
and I was just imagining him yelling at me, very disappointed, because he would say things like, "This is stopping all the action," and I can't do a Northern Irish accent, but he's
Few
like,
of us can. Few of us.
it's going well, and then you do this recap, and you throw this paragraph-long recap, and it's destroying the forward momentum. And I, as I'm reading his comments, I'm just picturing him screaming at me. But the nice thing about working with
he got so mad at our main character. He hated him so much.
He hated the main character.
It was like kind of just funny reading his comments. We're like, oh gosh.
Wait, did he rename? Did he rename any of your characters?
No.
Okay, he did that to me. He renamed some of my characters.
He made up words.
He gave them funny names,
like our locations.
Okay.
Yeah.
He did that, but we knew what he meant.
The very nice thing about hiring him as an editor was that what I really liked about him is he was unbelievably energetic with our manuscript. So what was nice about it was, and I have thick skin, I don't mind the number of comments that he gave, but what I was able to do intellectually was say, I felt like by hiring AP, I was hiring a person who was going to be able to tell me all of the possible problems that any potential reader could possibly have with it.
Yes.
So I'm at the end of the journey. That's right. I'm free to ignore a third of his comments.
Sure.
But then there's that 2/3 of there were certain comments that he would make that I would totally disagree with. And I would say, no, that's, I don't think that's right. Or I already explained this back here and maybe you missed it or something like that. But then that leaves the 2/3 of comments that are going to make our book so much better. And so it was just nice having someone who was going to tell us any potential issues that any reader would have getting through this book or enjoying the book or whatever. And then I was able to pick and choose which ones I thought were most important.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's the best at that. Yeah, he really is. And it's something, and obviously, not everyone can afford to hire a developmental editor who is a professional like AP. But as much as people can, I encourage them to get feedback, because even, and try to tell people, if your mother reads your book, she's just going to say she loves it no matter
I
what.
know.
Probably, unless you're Joe Abercrombie, apparently, because Joe Abercrombie says his mother really rips him apart because she's a pretty accomplished scholar or literary person herself, I think. So, but yeah, most of the time, it's much better to have someone who's capable of having that distance and seeing, and AP is just so good at it. He's a professional.
Yeah,
So.
when we had that first meeting with him and he did like the first few pages of our first chapter, kind of showing what he could do, we're like, wow, he is a magician. Like we could not, like, there are things that you just don't even notice and that you would never see that he points out, and then he fixes and you're just like, yeah. Didn't think of that at all.
He's got a very,
Yeah.
I would say, just as an English philosophy person myself, I admire the fact that he has a very inductive mind. He is able to spot
Where we're going.
a bunch of different things, and then he's able to detect a pattern, and then he's able to synthesize that information and present it as a broad set of bullet points of basically he's very good at pattern recognition.
Exactly. Consistency and the integrity of the narrative. And he'll point out things you didn't even realize that were inconsistent or could lead to these potential problems. And all you have to do is, he's also very good at giving elegant solutions. Like he'll say, all you need to do here to avoid these 5 problems is take this little thing out here, and then that works. He's really good at that. Yeah.
So Philip, then I keep asking you interview questions. I'm just genuinely curious.
Oh, it's cool.
Tell me, Philip, about the process for you, because I remember we talked about this a little bit in our last conversation, but I actually wanted to get, before we pass this portion of the discussion, I wanted to get a sense of what the process was like for you, starting with AP and then moving toward publishing. So we've talked about the fact that you were writing this trilogy for many years. This thing was your baby. You were working on it. Then you hit the point where you were finished and you submitted, I don't know, maybe the first one to AP first. Did you do that? Or did you submit all 3 to him?
One at a time.
One at a time. And then how did you go about publishing? Because the one thing we didn't talk about was what exactly you chose to do in terms of publishing, like what the process was like and how that whole stretch of time went for you.
Yeah. So like you, I was working with an agent, or I had an agent. He was totally on board. And even before I got AP to look at my manuscripts. And I know Matt Bieler, I don't know him personally or anything like that, but I've heard of him and I know that he's one of the best. But mine also is a fantastic guy named Simon Lipscar, he's gotten all kinds of great books out there in the world. He's got a pretty storied career as a literary agent. But anyway, it was great to work with him, and he helped me make the books better in the same way that Matt Bieler has done for you. But I did get to a point where I think my agent had submitted and, no takers. And it was really horrific timing too, because for me, I'm writing epic fantasy and it's not that the hot thing right now, as you probably know. Epic fantasy is, I don't think it's dead or dying, by the way, but it's just right now, it's in a down cycle in terms of traditional publishing, at least. So, but anyway, so that wasn't going anywhere. And I decided to engage AP and then have when I finished responding to AP's suggestions, and like you, I took some and I ignored others, and and I felt very strongly that his feedback made the books much better. But I had my agent one last time try to submit the books, and it took like a year. This was during the pandemic. It took like a year for the publishers to even acknowledge that they had gotten the submission. It was just like, whoa, okay. Do I want to wait forever, even if I do get an affirmative response from someone? And I was increasingly learning about self-publishing and how there's so much creative freedom, and also the freedom to like I decided I want to put out all 3 books in a year. I don't think any traditional publisher would have looked at this nobody and said, yeah, sure, you can publish all 3 of your books in 1 year from us. Why not? You know, that would not have happened. So I just embraced it. And I think I told you, Jordan, during our discussion, I felt a real sense of liberation when I gave up on traditional publishing and decided to just take charge of this myself. I felt empowered. I felt really empowered. And I have not looked back since. I'm so glad I did it. And of course, it's more work for me getting the book out. I have to find an artist and a cover designer and a map maker and make sure this could be the best thing that I can afford to put out, you know, and of course the editorial help that I got from AP, all of it, you know, but I found myself just saying, you know what, okay, if that's a role I have to play, I didn't feel like I was necessarily the best at any of the, you know, being this sort of manager of my books as well as the writer and also the marketer. You know, the marketing part is like I'm an English professor. I'm not supposed to be good at marketing. So but I've just sort of done my best in wearing all these hats, and I feel pretty good about it. It's a growth process, really, in many ways, because I had to learn how to. I mean, I'm here on YouTube making videos. If you told me 5 years ago you're going to be running a YouTube channel and talking to all kinds of people, I would think you're nuts. I hate social media. So, but here I am, you know. And it's all because I'm crazy and passionate about this. And I think that's what you have to have. That it's going to have to carry you through a lot.
So when you decided to do it, did you use like Amazon? Like, how did you do it?
Oh yeah, so the technical part of it. Yeah, so I used you have a Mac, I know, because Jordan went like this and you got the thumbs up thing.
Oh, I didn't even realize that's why that happened.
Yeah. Yeah, when you go, I don't know if I can do it right now. I think I might insert, oh, whoops.
Oh,
Okay.
fireworks.
That's a Mac. Yeah.
How did I not know?
I didn't know that you could do that.
No,
Is
when
that
you
what
did this,
sometimes-
Jordan, you got a thumb up. I don't know if I can. There it is. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. There you go.
Ah, that explains it. There have been thumbs floating up into our videos, and I'm often wondering why the heck
What is
that
this?
happening?
Hey, look, you can do this too.
Oh my gosh. Why did I not know this?
Wow. I like that. I'm gonna start doing that.
Yeah, I mean, you got these. There's, I think, a couple others. I can't remember. There was the 2 thumbs up. There's a couple others I'm forgetting.
Wow. Any technology sufficiently advanced is indistinguishable from
Just
magic.
try different gestures, or I don't know what, but you know.
Wow, Asimov was right. That is wonderful.
So what were we talking about? Oh, yes, I know. Okay. So I was saying you have a Mac, and I could tell because you got those effects. I use a program called Vellum to format my books, and I love it. And it, unfortunately, it's only available for Macs, but it's great. It does things that I know I couldn't do. Back in the day, people had to do this like manually, you know, inside Word and stuff. Save yourself a ton of trouble if you're self-publishing. Get one of these software programs like Vellum is the one I have. But there are others. I'm not just plugging Vellum, but get one of these programs and it will format everything for you. It's just so even I can figure it out than most people can. So that part is, yeah, the formatting. And then you've got to choose which platform you're going to publish from. And I went with 2, which you can do. It's perfectly fine. The reason I'm doing both through Amazon KDP and Ingram Spark is that, by the way, Amazon, the ebook is Amazon only. It's KDP only. And that's the thing. You work with the giant. They don't want you to work with anyone else when it comes with the ebook. So you kind of give that right away when you work with Amazon for your ebook. But the physical book is different. I'm allowed to publish through Amazon with the physical book, which I've done, but I also publish the physical book through Ingram Spark. And the reason for that is libraries and other bookstores do not like to play with Amazon. They don't like Amazon, so they won't buy from Amazon. So if you want libraries and other bookstores like Barnes and Noble or whatever to be able to sell your books, you need to go through another entity. Ingram Spark is one of the best known. It's not the only one. There are other ones. Again, I'm not plugging any of these. It's just the ones that I, after doing my research, decided to go with. But so yeah, and then it's just simple a matter of submitting you got to get a cover done. And that has to be done. It's different slightly different for Amazon and Ingram Sparks. You have to have two different ones in my case. But if you just do physical through one and ebook through the other, you're going to have different covers. But if you work with a cover designer, which I did, Jack Shepard, who also did my map, it's much easier. Maybe you're more savvy than I am and you want to just do your own cover, great. But I hired an artist and a cover designer, and the cover designer basically figured out, okay, these are the specs for me for this cover to be submittable to Amazon, and here are the specs for Ingram Spark. So here are your two versions. Go ahead and submit. There's a template for Ingram Spark. You just got to follow it.
Mhm.
And yeah, and then you take your interior that has been beautifully formatted by Vellum or whatever software program you've used, and you simply click it into the place in KDP where it says put your manuscript here, put your file here. Here's the cover for the file for your cover, put it there. You got to follow the directions, and it's pretty simple. Yeah. So, but
Very
yeah.
nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Nice.
appreciate you walking us through that. a
Yeah,
little
I mean, all that is anything anyone can figure out. The really hard part is marketing.
Yeah.
Right.
The really tough part is networking and marketing. And I can't claim to be an ace at that either. I've done well enough, I guess, probably better than the average self-published author, but I can't retire off of, I can't just be a full-time writer, not even close at this
Right.
point. But yeah, I mean, there are all kinds of ways of getting the word out. Having your YouTube channel is a good start, but you have to be active on Twitter, I think, and what's the other one?
Instagram.
Yeah, that one. That helps. But yeah, network, and reach out to people and go to, I guess, Worldcon or whatever. And still, most people, the reality is, I think it's important to be honest. Most people are probably going to lose money on this, or not make very much at all. And that's the reality for most people. And so I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't advise anyone to do it unless you're just going to enjoy the heck out of the process.
Right.
If you're doing it to make money, then good luck,
Yeah.
That's like starting a YouTube channel to get rich,
Right. Right.
probably better off buying a lottery ticket, right?
Mhm.
Right.
So, but
Especially with the time it takes to make videos.
yeah, if you look at the time it takes to write a book, or make
Yeah.
videos, and have a channel, the ratio of time spent to profit is you're making pennies on the hour.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it's crazy. But that's why you have to be passionate. You just have to be passionate. We do this because we love it. That's it. That's it.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, we
And
want to tell stories.
Mhm.
So
we want to tell stories. We want our stories to come alive in the minds of readers, and to have any feedback from any reader at all is just bliss. It's
Yeah.
wonderful. It's just like, wow, okay, somebody read my story. Somebody actually liked my story. It spoke to someone in a way, and that's where you realize, yeah, okay, maybe I'm not going to be, Stephen King or J.K. Rowling or something, but my story's out there. It's alive, and maybe it even helps someone. So yeah.
yeah, that's a great attitude to have, and I think we feel very much similarly there. I have no illusions that I'm going to be able to quit my day job. It would be nice.
Yeah.
It would be nice if if we indie publish our book and it becomes successful enough, maybe it gets picked up by traditional publishing. Maybe we say no to that, and I don't know. I think along with most people,
We have to finish first.
I have my best case scenario, and I also have what's more likely, which is, will I even make my money back on this? I think you made your money back, right? And
I have made a profit. I have.
Okay, very good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, I can't retire off of this modest profit, but You know, and it depends on how much you put into it also. I mean,
Right.
yeah, I mean, I'm happy with where I am, and I have this special edition coming out. I'm very, very fortunate to be in that position, and an audiobook now coming out. It's narrated by Alan from the Library of Alexandria, so I'm really excited about that. And yeah, just happy to have people reading it, and some of them actually enjoying it. So
I loved the first book. I loved it very
yeah.
much. And so did Alan's audiobook, did that come out yet?
Not yet. I believe it'll be out either late this month or early next.
Okay.
So yeah, I haven't heard from him recently, so I'm thinking probably early September. So, but yeah, he's nearly there. He's really putting in. Talk about a learning process. You know, he's got. I already knew he had the raw talent. You know, he has all these voices that he does and
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
I've seen him act before, and he's immensely talented. But he had to learn how to make quality recordings that would sound good, and that's a lot harder than most people think. There's a lot to it. So he had to create his own little sound booth in his home, but he also has had to get a lot of technical help, and it's a huge learning curve for this. But yeah. And you'd be surprised how hard it is to actually just read through a whole page without making any mistakes, you know?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And stay true to the accents that you've been doing, and
Yeah.
know enough to read enough ahead so that when I don't know, like a character speaks and then you say later that she said that in a gruff voice or something like that, you have to read ahead,
And
or when you
plan ahead. Yeah. Practice. Yeah.
so that you can go
There's a
back
lot.
and say it right. Yeah.
And so that's why it's expensive to get an audiobook narrator. The amount of work they have to put in, the amount of time they have to put in, it really is a lot. So they'll get usually paid by the finished hour. So if your book is like 20 finished hours long, then you pay a certain rate, and it really will depend on the level of experience often. So the really experienced ones will get, you know, $400 per finished hour or something, and that adds up, you know. So yeah, that's an investment, you know. And you know, I feel if you can, and not everyone can, and that's why a lot of self-published authors don't have audiobooks, because it's so expensive. But I feel that yeah, it'll help me to reach a bigger audience.
Oh yeah.
And it'll be fun. It's just going to be fun because I think Alan is doing a great job. So
Yeah. Well, she wants me to do if we do an indie publish, she wants me to do the audiobook. And
Yep.
I don't know how I feel about that, because I imagine there's some professional that can do it way better.
Oh, you'll do great.
But I would definitely be willing to try. And I like reading out loud. I do.
And he does voices.
Yes. Yeah. So
cool.
I would be willing to do it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's so another, you know, a growth process, learning how to do all that.
Yeah.
I do have one unrelated question.
Sure.
So Dear Dr. Fantasy, is that at all inspired by Grateful Dead's Dear Mr. Fantasy?
It is.
Okay.
It is. So actually, was it Grateful Dead, or it was what was the name of the group? Oh, I'm blanking here. Wait, I'll look it up.
Grateful Dead at least covers it.
They covered it.
Yeah.
So, but it was originally done by, what's his name? Steve Winwood, and I'm blanking on the name of his band, but I will find it for you. Traffic, of course, Traffic. Yeah. So it was Traffic, and actually Mike from Mike's Book Reviews is the one who gave me the
Oh, really? Wow.
Yep. He's the one who suggested it, because when I started doing this, like talking to other people, I, of course, did not invent this thing. Mike was doing his talk about nothing. Jimmy has Chatting with Nuts, you know, people doing, I thought, I want to do that, you know, what do I call it? And I got a bunch of suggestions, and Mike is the one who came up with, because I was already being called Dr. Fantasy.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I even at one point on an episode of it, back then it was The Week That Was, not The Weeks That Were, because I was still doing it every week. But I even sang Dear Mr. Fantasy for a really tortuous, probably 15 seconds or so. But I changed it to Dear Dr. Fantasy. So yeah. It's always Steve Winwood Traffic is the the original version, which I love. I love that kind of psychedelic rock anyway. So when Mike suggested, I was like, yeah, that's perfect.
Perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. And you literally are a doctor. And you literally are a doctor. I'm the odd one out here. I'm the only one here that doesn't have a PhD. So
Well, you know, I don't think you need it.
Doctor and Mister. Doctor and Mister.
Yeah. So, well, this has been a huge pleasure, you two. I am so glad that we decided to do this and chat about our passion. I mean, this is something we could do all day long, probably.
Yeah.
But you have stuff to do, and I do as well. But this has been a huge pleasure. I really enjoyed this a lot, especially getting to talk to you, Nikki, for the first time. So thank you so
Yeah,
much.
it's really nice to meet you.
Yeah,
She's a good gal, isn't she?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Philip. This was awesome. Lovely getting to talk with you, surrounded by your books, hear your insights about the publishing process and everything else that you're doing, and to share a little bit about ourselves. And we'll have to do this again,
It's
man.
fun.
This was wonderful.
We'll do it. We'll do it. We're here. And you guys aren't even all that far away either. So who knows?
No,
I-
we're close. We're
I have
close.
this idea that we should, all we booktubers should just get together sometime. And
Oh, that'd be awesome.
Yeah.
That'd be
That
awesome.
would be fun.
Do a little convention. We
Yeah.
make our own little convention. I'll get together.
yeah. But in the meantime, this is good. And thank you so much for chatting with me. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Leave some comments. Check out iWizard. There's a link in the description. And until next time.